Why would you use a 98 square inch racket when you could have 100?
Because the 98s are better. That's why.
Are they? Really?
Yeah. We're going to go 98 versus 100, find out which one is the best and which one might be the best for you. Subscribe. So over months of testing, we've gone through essentially every racket we have, 98 versus 100, 98 versus 100, to find out what the differences are and why you should choose a 98.
Yes, so we've only got a few examples here to show you today, but we have been doing this. We've used the Prince Beast 198, we've done the new Wilson Blade, we've done the Babolat Strike, we've done the V-Core, we've done Prestiges,
yep.
We've got Aeros here, we've got E-Zones here, and we've got Percepts here.
And this is to really wind you up. We've got the Percept 100, obviously, and we've got the Percept 97. So not a 98, but should be a good test.
Yes, it's still, the premise is the same. What happens when you either stretch or shrink your racket from 100 to 98 or from 97 up to 100?
Yes. So what is supposed to happen, Ben?
Well, what is supposed to happen is that as you decrease the size of the head, you make the strings closer together, you get a small, say you've got a smaller target basically, which means you get a denser, more consistent impact. The smaller frame also creates a slightly more stable contact feel, so you should have more power from the middle of the racket, a smaller sweet spot, but generally it should be a little bit harder to use.
Yes,
that's the trade-off.
That's what the 98s do. So the 100s, obviously, conversely,
yep,
do the other. You should get a little bit more forgiveness. You should get a little bit more power. You should get a little bit more spin because the string bed opens up. Obviously, this does depend on the string pattern. We've tried to select rackets today that have the same, or at least as close to. So the E-Zones do have the same 16 by 19 pattern. The Aero is slightly different. You get an extra cross in the 98.
Yes, you get 16 20.
And with the Percept, trusty old Yonex, 16-19 in both.
I'm going to use the word interesting. I often get accused of using the word interesting when it isn't. It's interesting to me that it is basically impossible to find exactly the same, but just a different head size. So every single brand changes something else to accommodate for the head size change.
Yes.
Commonly, as the head size goes from 100 to 98, the racket gets slightly heavier and the balance point will shift slightly towards the head as well.
Yes.
That, I'm not saying exclusively, not saying every single time, but that is a common edit that rackets are made when the head size is shrunk at the same time.
Yes. All right.
Interesting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool, as long as you think so.
Yeah.
All right, so we have got all our rackets paired up, and in each of those rackets we've used exactly the same string. So for example, in our Aeros here, we've got Babolat RPM Blast.
Percepts, we've got Polytour Pro. E-Zones, we've got Polytour Pro.
And then when we had the Beasts and the Strikes and the Blades, we did exactly the same thing. Same string in both rackets at £50. So as fair a test as possible. The only thing we are changing is the 100 to the 98 version.
Let's go. '98s versus 100, an age-old debate. We've been through all of the rackets we possibly can where those two versions are comparable. And this is what we think. What do you think in general?
In general, it's really difficult, isn't it? It's very racket dependent.
Yeah.
Like I prefer the 98 in some, the 100 in others. So, you know, but I'd say overall, I would say 100s are going to be easier.
Yeah.
98's a little bit more difficult to use, this is. And I think 100s are more varied and 98s are more consistent.
Yes, I think that's one of the big things, isn't it? Is that 100s seem to have a sort of wide variety of how they can play and how they can feel, whereas 98s seem to come a little bit closer together. I play with an E-Zone 98 Tour, and picking up an Aero 98, something like that, feels great. Feels really similar. I think that I prefer 98s. I prefer everything squished in. I prefer more control, prefer the extra bit of weight that you tend to get with a 98. I prefer that stability. But
and I definitely prefer 100s, I think.
Yeah.
But again, it's really, really difficult. I think that like this is the big takeaway. If you only take away one thing from this, it really, you have got to try.
Yes.
And interestingly, the difference between 100 and 98 can be vast, or minute.
Yes.
It depends on the racket.
Yeah.
Like some of them, you can barely notice you've dropped that 2 square inches, and other rackets it feels like a completely different thing.
Absolutely. So the Percepts, I know we're going from 97 to 100, but they feel like completely different rackets.
Yes, yeah.
They
So
do.
I don't think you can compare a Percept 97 to a Percept 100, but the Aero to the Aero 98 felt very, very similar.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting factor that we uncovered as we were going through.
And I think in the spin rackets especially, that seems to be more the case. They seem to be closer aligned, whereas I think that the control frames, that's where you get the biggest differential. I think
it has long been I wouldn't say a pet peeve. It doesn't irritate me, but something I certainly notice is that some rackets stretch and shrink better than others.
Yeah.
So generally, I do not like rackets that have been altered. So, for example, the Percept was designed as a 97 and then made into a 100.
Yeah.
Don't like the 100 so much.
No.
For example, I don't like the Strike 100 as it's been stretched up from 98. Yeah. But then you could say the Pure Drive 98, I'm not such a huge fan of either. So that's been shrunken down.
Yeah.
So it's that editing of the original seems to be my big issue.
Yeah.
I don't like it when they've edited rackets.
I think the shrinking down to me tends to work better. I would say I think if you're using 100 and you want something more stable and you want something that's a little bit more control based, that's very loosely speaking, then moving to that 98 I think it makes more sense. And that's certainly what I did. That shrinking down, it is the going up, and I felt the same with the ProStaff X, is that with that control frame, with the ProStaff 97, that is the precision frame. That is what it's for. That thing. So as soon as you start taking that away, you start taking away literally from what the racket does best, and that is particularly true in control frames.
Conversely, when you take something like the Aero, which is the spin frame, and it's got that nice wide string pattern, and the grommets are designed to let the strings move, you get as much bite on the ball as possible, add an extra cross string and shrink the head size, you certainly lose loads of what makes an Aero, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're kind of saying, isn't it? Is when you shrink them down, you change the racket, but it seems to be often it can be a positive, but it's rarely a positive to stretch them up.
Yes.
The one example of that one being different would be the new Blade 100, which is arguably a better racket, the 100 than the 298, which is rare, but I think that's the distinction. It stands out as being the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah, agreed. So on power, you going 98 or 100?
I'm going 100 because you get more power more often.
Yes.
You get the bigger sweet spot, you get more, what's the word I'm looking for? More
forgiveness.
Yeah, forgiveness, safety net. You don't have to middle it every single time. And you also get the more extremes.
Yeah.
So the Pure Drive, the E-Zone 100, the Beast 100 are big power. That's kind of what we're saying, right? If you were going to design a racket for maximum power, you'd make it 100.
Yes, I think so, and I think that for power, I would go the 100 as well. Often with power frames, like in the E-Zone, I would actually recommend going down to 98 so you get some of that control back. But there you go. Yes. And the same probably applies for spin.
Yes, what we expected does appear to be true.
Yes.
If you want massive spin, 100 makes far more sense than a 98 or a 97.
Yeah.
It just does.
And then you get to the categories where I think the script flips. Script flips. Yeah, where if you're looking for control and precision, as has already been mentioned, you go 98. Everything's a little bit denser. You got less string movement, so you lose power and spin, but you get back some control. And I also think you get back some feel, and that could be personal preference. But with touch and feel on the 98s, I feel because you've got more stability, I'm just able to do more. I'm able to control the racket a little bit easier.
I think that's the word. It's the stability.
Yeah.
Creates control and it creates feel through stableness.
Yes.
That sounds like Zoolander, doesn't it? Because you've got a tighter string bed, you just have a more solid connection.
Yes.
Which feels more comfortable most of the time.
Yeah.
But whether that means you're going to get a more feely racket, who knows? Again, it depends on everything else.
Yes.
You know?
As always, and very specifically with doing this 98 versus 100, you've got to try and see what you prefer. It's not better, despite what my ego might tell me, it's not better to use a 98. It's not necessarily easier to use a 100 because I don't find it easier. So you must try and, but generally, this is what we think about those.
So who it's for, I would say the stronger you get as a player, and sorry, the more able, stronger in terms of ability, you can probably look towards shrinking the head size.
Yeah.
Beginner players, you're going to be at 100. We haven't looked at oversized rackets here. Obviously, you can go up to 102, 105. There's a few 110s and 115s out there.
Madness.
Which is, I mean, they're insane rackets.
Yeah.
But the point is that yes, they are extremely easy to use because they're big and easy and comfy.
Yeah.
So if we just extrapolate that process down, the better you get, the smaller head size you can use. It's whether you want the benefits of the smaller head size.
Yes.
And personally, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't see necessarily a significant advantage to my game of going down to a 98. I don't see the benefit.
No, and I think
doesn't mean they're not there. Obviously.
No, exactly. Yeah, and I think I do. I went from 100 to a 98 to a 98 tour, and have found over playing with different rackets for years and years that's what I like. Yeah. I want the smaller head, I want a heavier frame, I want more stability, but it's just personal preference. Yeah. So which one is the right one for you? We don't know.
No, it's really, really racket dependent.
Yeah.
And it's really, really player dependent.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not arrogant enough because we don't know you. We don't know how you play. So you've got to get out and try it. I would go 98, Ben would go 100. You need to find the one for you. As always, don't forget to subscribe, follow us, like, share, and never miss a thing from PH Tennis.